Her duties alternated between military or police scouting and factory work. For the 2 week period, which would end the next day, she had been on air patrol. This did not mean, as I first imagined, that she was flying, but rather that she was on the lookout for Han ships over this outlying section of the Wyoming territory, and had spent most of her time perched in the treetops scanning the skies. Had she seen one, she would have fired a drop flare several miles off to one side, which would ignite when it was floating vertically toward the Earth, so that the direction or point from which it had been fired might not be guessed by the airship and bring a blasting play of the disintegrator ray in her vicinity. Other members of the Air Patrol would send up rockets on seeing hers until finally a scout, equipped with a ultrophone, which, unlike the ancient radio, operated on the ultronic ethereal vibrations, would pass the warning simultaneously to the headquarters of the Wyoming Gang and other communities within a radius of several hundred miles, not to mention the few American rocket ships that might be in the air and which instantly would duck to cover either through forest clearings or by flattening down to earth in green fields where their coloring would probably protect them from observation. The favorite American method of propulsion was known as rocketing. The rocket is what I would describe, from my 20th century comprehension of the matter, as an extremely powerful gas blast atomically produced through the stimulation of chemical action. Scientists of today regard it as a childishly simple reaction. But by that very virtue, most economical and efficient. But tomorrow, she explained, she would go back to work in the cloth plant, where she would take charge of one of the synthetic processes by which those wonderful substitutes for woven fabrics of wool, cotton, and silk are produced. At the end of another 2 weeks, she would be back on military duty again, perhaps at the same work, or maybe as a contact guard on duty where the territory of the Wyomings merged with that of the Delawares or the Susquehannas. Susquehannas were one of the half dozen other gangs in that section of the country which I knew as Pennsylvania and New York states. Wilma cleared up for me the mystery of those flying leaps which she and her assailants had made, and explained in the following manner how the inertron belt balances weight. Jumpers were in common use at the time I awoke, though they were costly, for at that time inertron had not been produced in very great quantity. They were very useful in the forest. They were belts strapped high under the arms, containing an amount of inertron adjusted to the wearer's weight and purposes. In effect, they made a man weigh as little as he desired, 2 pounds if he liked. Floaters are a later development of jumpers, rocket motors encased in inertron blocks and strapped to the back in such a way that the wearer floats when drifting, facing slightly downward. With his motor in operation, he moves like a diver, head foremost, controlling his direction by twisting his body and by movements of his outstretched arms and hands. Ballast weights locked in the front of the belt adjust weight and lift. Some men prefer a few ounces of weight in floating, using a slight motor thrust to overcome this. Others prefer a buoyance balance of a few ounces. The inadvertent dropping of weight is not a serious matter. The motor thrust always can be used to descend, but as an extra precaution, in case the motor should fail for any reason, there are built into every belt a number of detachable sections, one or more of which can be discarded to balance off any loss in weight. But who were your assailants? I asked. And why were you attacked? Her assailants, she told me, were members of an outlaw gang, referred to as Bad Bloods, a group which for several generations had been under the domination of conscienceless leaders who tried to advance their interests in their clan by tactics which their neighbors had come to regard as unfair, and who in consequence had been virtually boycotted. Their purpose had been to slay her near the Delaware frontier, making it appear that the crime had been committed by Delaware scouts, and thus embroil the Delawares and Wyomings in acts of reprisal against each other, or at least cause suspicions. Fortunately, they had not succeeded in surprising her, and she had been successful in dodging them for some 2 hours before the shooting began at the moment when I arrived on the scene. But we must not stay here talking, Wilma concluded. I have to take you in, and besides, I must report this attack right away. I think we had better slip over to the other side of the mountain. Whoever is on that post will have a phone, and I can make a direct report, but you'll have to have a belt. Mine alone won't help much against our combined weights, and there's little to be gained by jumping heavy. It's almost as bad as walking. After a little search, we found one of the men I had killed, who had floated down among the trees some distance away, and whose belt was not badly damaged. In detaching it from his body, it nearly got away from me and shot up in the air. Wilma caught it, however, and though it reinforced the lift of her own belt so that she had to hook her knee around a branch to hold herself down, she saved it. I climbed the tree, and with my weight added to hers, we floated down easily.